Welcome to this podcast series on neo-charismatic leadership with author, leadership expert and coach Dr. Ghada Angawi and executive leader Martin Headley, where they will both explore the recently published book Neo-Charismatic Leadership and the coaching topics it covers.
Martin, we are here today on our fourth episode and about to explore with our listeners the prerequisites of neo-charismatic leadership. After we rolled up our sleeves and dug into the last two episodes, exploring the definition and its implications, I would like to start by asking a few questions that our listeners can reflect on while we are having this discussion. So, what does a leader, in your understanding, look like in terms of their personality and how they come across?
Okay, good question, Ghada. Because so many of the existing documents and writings out there don't really address personality so much. So at first, when you spoke to me about this, I had to think really long and hard. But I think the most important thing that I notice about their personality is that they are confident and honest and that their ideas make sense. Okay, so that is, in a way, their ideas make sense, perhaps more so because they are confident and honest. Mm-hmm. You have less of a level of comfort with somebody who doesn't appear to be confident, for example. And then beyond that, there is a passion for the area of common interest. So whatever it is that has brought the two of us together to work on, they must be as passionate as I am about it, or almost as so that I can actually believe that they want to make the same change that I'm basically signing up to follow them for.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that's very important. The third thing I noted was that they take a genuine interest, though, in those with them and around them. So, if it's great to see them treating me and others like me who are following them very, very well, very nicely, but it also matters how that leader treats other people as well. So, it's definitely not winning at all cost. It is winning, but trying to find a benefit for everybody else as well. And those three things that I've mentioned tend to fall down if that leader does not have a track record over time of actually making these things happen. So that is perhaps not a personality trait, going back to your question. But I think what happens is how I see the leader's personality after a while, if things don't start to happen, tends to change. And so then I consider that, they don't really have the personality to lead.
Yeah. So it's mainly about the influence they have over their followers. And this doesn't happen overnight. It just develops through what you've just mentioned.
Very much so. It does build upon itself. And you have a short period of time. Probably, well, I suppose it depends on the size of the goal, but I would say you have a short period of time of, say, maybe 2 to 3 months to really enroll team members into whatever it is that you're doing.
Yes, wholeheartedly.
But, then if you can imagine it on a graph, your skills and the way people perceive you is going up slowly and slowly over that 3 months. It gets to an acceptable point where most people are willing to follow. But that's the point you can also lose it as well. So if nothing is happening or there's just lots and lots of talk, but no real action, then that starts to go down again. And so the way you perceive their personality has then changed.
So there is this balance between the culture of how they interact together and how they communicate, and then the achievements or the productivity or the performance, say, of how this leader pushes things forward in terms of an outcome. That's great. My second question is this image exclusive to a color, race, gender, age, or status? How can you start to challenge your own biases?
That is up a very significant question, especially with what's going on around us right now, I think. Very, very timely too. I would love to say that it makes no difference. Color, race, gender, age, national origin, you list all of the so-called protected characteristics. And you say, well, it shouldn't make any difference. Well, perhaps on the surface it doesn't. Somebody who comes to me, for example, you and I started working together. You're from Saudi Arabia, I'm from the UK, and have lived a lot in the US. So we come from very different backgrounds, different cultures and everything. But in a relatively short period of time, we had established a relationship between ourselves, which was built on mutual respect and understanding of what it is that we were trying to achieve and the changes that we were trying to make in the world. Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, I don't think that on the face of it, that makes much difference.
Yeah.
Below that, however, there's this insidious, what they call unconscious bias that we all have, whether we want to admit it or not.
Yeah.
And this is hard to look at. So, what we've got to do is say, well, is that leader doing something that I wouldn't agree with because in their culture that's acceptable?
Yeah.
And are they doing it because, with their national origin or whatever it happens to be, that's what I consider to be normal for them? The question should then go down and say, well, am I sort of in agreement with what that culture tends to believe or what that culture is trying to achieve? Mm. And if I'm not, can I actually follow this person? Or the other way around, could they actually follow me? See, that gets into a much deeper level of questioning. And, whilst the first 2 to 3 months may be fine working with a leader, you may notice things during that period of time and say, gosh, that's not acceptable. And you have to start saying, well, wait a minute, why do I think it's not acceptable? Is it a cultural difference? Is it a social difference, that I'm not aware of? And, irrespective of race and sex and things, what I've noticed between groups, even amongst very homogenous groups of white men and women working together, is that if there's a huge socio-economic divide between those two people, there might as well be a racial or religious divide or whatever, what have you, okay, because that can happen in any group. So that's why I say you really have to take a look at your unconscious biases before you can really begin to lead. And of course, the implication of that to the leader, right, is, okay, if people aren't following you or people are hesitating, then you have got to confront this head on and say, I think there might be a cultural difference between us that is making you not comfortable with me. And I would like to resolve that. Okay. And then perhaps both can make adjustments, Yeah. That's the way I see that.
I'm also an intercultural communication expert. And
yes.
I do these kind of assessments. And in my work with teams and leaders, this comes at the upfront of any engagement. When I start looking at the communication style and how people behave around each other, the body language, and how they arrive to decisions or even resolve conflicts, there is always this element of cultural differences. And it's not just about a geographical location or a gender or a race. It's also in the same culture, in the same geographical location. People differ. 2 homes are different. 2 companies are different. 2 professions have the 2 different cultures. It is biases that we are unconscious of. Does really require a lot of self-awareness from a leader, which is something we're going to talk about in this episode. And it does also require coaching.
Yes.
Which is something we're going to talk about
That's very
later
important.
As we move on. So my third question, what do you believe about your own ability to lead, Martin?
That's very interesting, isn't it? Now it comes home to, a very pointed question, personal question. So one has to think about it. I believe my ability to lead has taken a lot of learning and practice. Okay. Oddly enough, it took a mentor, which I think I've described before earlier in the podcast. It took a mentor to really point out to me that, you know, do you want to lead? All you've got to do is say you're going to lead and people will believe you. And so if you like, from the day that somebody actually gave me permission to lead, I've been a leader in training. I haven't stopped. I learn more and more about it every day. But the interesting thing there is, of course, each individual has the ability to lead. Everybody. And it depends more upon our circumstances and the need for a leader at the time rather than who's actually going to lead. So obviously, I think anybody who just steps up to lead is immediately a leader in training, and people will follow them just because they've done that. At times, the amount of response that I've got and the level of willingness of people to follow me has taken me by surprise. You know, and so I would encourage those that are listening thinking, gosh, you know, I'm really not sure if I could be a leader, or I'm not sure if I'm ready. The answer is yes, you can be. And yes, you are ready, but it's a lifelong journey. And, you know, you're never going to be a perfect leader, probably until the day you die.
Yes.
My ability is derived from others seeing and agreeing what I feel should be done. So what happens, that's what starts it. Okay. And so if I'm thinking of doing something different, I float an idea and I see if people respond to that idea. And if there's okay, it's a nice idea and nobody's really excited, then I know that I'm not hitting on something that is needed right then. Okay. Unless I'm totally convinced that it's the next big thing and everybody needs it and they just don't know, but that's rare. Okay. Normally I'm going to float an idea, and if people are interested in it, that's good, but they've got to sort of show some passion too. That's when I learnt it was time for me to start putting in some serious effort into leading that role. And then the final thing that I think I've noticed about my leadership is it's not always tied to an income generating opportunity. You know, if the only reason that you want to lead, or the only opportunity you have to lead, just happens to be an income generating opportunity, then great. But if you're going to learn, if you're really going to become that neo-charismatic leader, you're going to have to lead in a lot of different situations.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to lead in the community. You're going to have to lead, you know, within your religion. If you happen to be religious, you have to lead in your community. You know, it could be education. It could be many, many different areas.
In any communication, you have to lead. I mean, even now we're having this communication. Somehow you have to step up and say something or interact with the other person. Or if there is a situation at home where you need to, you know, take the lead, pick up yourself and go to a child's room and just sit with them and you know, lead the conversation, lead them out of their, you know, mood. This is normal and it happens every day. But we don't notice. We don't think it's leadership when we label it as different labels, but it is actually leadership. So I suggest that our listeners really consider every kind of interaction as an opportunity to practice their leadership, even at a small scale, and then reflect on how it went.
Yes.
And how it felt for them.
The reflection is so important. When I think about my leadership, the view of others about me is important for me to hear. So feedback is important for me. Now, that doesn't mean it's always right, okay? But it is always feedback, and it needs to be thought of. So in some respects, you know, what you've described, a parent is a leader, because a parent, you know, will sit with a child and work through an issue. So, you know, all of us in our family relationships get a little taste of leadership. We just don't call it that. And I think, it serves us well to go back and think, well, you know, as a parent, or, you know, if you're not a parent yet, how did my parents handle particular situations? And, you know, did I ever give them feedback? If you've got a tiny baby, it's going to give you feedback because it's going to scream until you solve the problem, right? But fortunately, when we're all adults, we don't react like that. But I think the key point here is we have to develop our leadership abilities from our own core, what's inside us, not from what others may want or the context that we exist in. So while the timing has to be something that other people are interested in, the leadership has to come from what's inside of you and me and everybody else. It cannot be superimposed.
This is interesting because while we influence others in our leadership, which means we have to get some feedback to help us improve, we also are conscious of our own effort in leading others. So this is the balance between what is coming from my core and how do I perceive others and reflect back on them.
So you've been probing me a little bit to find some of the prerequisites on my leadership journey, if you like. Let's move now to talk about the prerequisites that you've noted in your research. We all need to understand the foundations, so that we can have something to build on.
Yeah, so this is an indirect outcome of observing leaders, new charismatic leaders in action beside the research, but also as I coached leaders, this was coming out of the coaching sessions. There are 3 things that I have noticed that are very important for any leader to step up to a new charismatic leadership. Number 1, you've just spoke about it. It's the self-awareness and ability to direct your own thoughts and emotions in the moment. Some call it presence, others call it mindfulness. I just simply like the word awareness, self-awareness, being aware of your own, what's happening in your head.
That's a very understandable word. I think for everybody listening will get that.
Simple.
And that's important.
Simple. I feel this, I think this, and I am thinking this right now. And I don't know why I'm thinking this, but I'm thinking this right now. And it's like, having that dialogue in your head about your thoughts and emotions.
Yes.
Silently, of course.
Right.
Nobody's going to hear you. It's inside your head, but you're not diverted away from it. So the difference between being self-aware and just aware, self-aware is more of I am hearing and seeing and keeping myself in that space for some time, not running away from my thoughts or trying to change physically the location or do something else so that I could divert or distract myself from that thought. I sit with it.
Yes.
I accept it. And I live with it for a while and, I resolve it. So that's number 1 for a leader. It's a must. And the number 2 is the empathy, not empathetic listening. Empathetic listening can be faked. It's like step number 1 into empathy. But empathy itself, it's inside you. It sits in. You relate to the world through empathy. You empathize even if that person is on TV or just walking, away from you or doing something, you have no relationship with them. You still empathize. You feel it.
Yes, that is a great point because the sort of fake empathy will actually destroy you as a leader very, very quickly. People recognize that you don't really care about something.
Caring, concern.
One clever trick that I was taught early on in my career was to, just pick up the news for a day on the television or the radio or something. And, very often there are sort of controversial people on the news. And they said, just try and listen to the news with the single objective of understanding that person's point of view, whether you agree with it or not. And, the first time I did it, I thought, oh, this is hard. And then you get better and better at it. But what you're doing is you're beginning to realize that, people do things for reasons which may or may not be good. But in many cases, they actually did do something for a good reason, but it didn't turn out so well. And so everybody, particularly in the media, is very happy to jump on them. But, there is you sitting there saying, okay, I don't agree with this person politically. I don't like the business that they're in. I don't like lots of things about it. So now I'm going to sit down and try and appreciate their point of view.
Yeah.
That will teach you empathy.
Yeah. And number 3 is having a personal noble goal, which we call vision, which we call purpose. So first of all, you have to develop these 3 skills and then come to new charismatic leadership ready to be a new charismatic leader.
Okay, that's good. 3 is not too hard a number to deal with. Again, yes. Part of what we're doing here is trying to make it as easy as we can for our listeners to self-develop, isn't it? So what I've noticed, though, is the self-awareness, empathy, and the personal vision or noble goal. There's a lot of information already about that, because if I'm not incorrect, aren't those key parts of emotional intelligence measured by EQ?
Yes, definitely. And the research proves it. And we're not going far from these things. We're just emphasizing that it is a prerequisite. It requires a really high level of emotional intelligence from a leader. It requires a level of cultural intelligence as well, which is the awareness we spoke about other cultures and your own biases.
That's very good. So we'll wrap this up into the original discussion with altruism and ethical standards. How would you define altruism then in a behavioral?
So altruism is not a prerequisite. It is a developed orientation. It is part of you. It is your core. If you are altruistic or you're egoistic, shades of altruism and egoism, and in situations you can be this or you can be that. The essence of it, that it is something that you can develop and increase in yourself with the increased empathy and awareness and the noble goal. You'll be sure to harness your altruistic or egoistic tendencies.
Until next time, Ghada, thanks very much, and thank you to our listeners.
Thank you.
Ghada and Martin, hope you enjoyed this episode. There is more information available at neocharismaticleadership.org. And if you would like to discuss coaching or training for yourself or your team, you can contact Ghada and Martin through the website. We look forward to your participation next week. Until then, goodbye.